we haven't given you some of the glossary or the index of some of the important mechanics that you will find in the board gaming space. And that's important to know because obviously, if I say something, for example, like area control, what's that? What does that mean? Why would I even like that? Right? Or if I
Yes.
was to say, this is a deduction game, you can make an assumption of what that is, but you may not actually know really, And so what we thought we would do today is we thought we would break down, we've got quite a few here, but we're going to break down some of the most well-known and the most of these mechanics and gaming genres. So generally the way that games are broken down is not via their theme, it's by their mechanic and their genre.
So
And
this
so
is your board game 101 course.
pretty much.
Completely for
So
free. We normally charge for this.
yeah, exactly right. So, and we will be taking a pop quiz at the end. So we'll see. But for example, we're just going to start with one very quickly. And this is the one that we all know. And this is the one, it's called the roll and move. So this is our very first mechanic we're going to start with. And the reason that we're going to start with roll and move is because you already know what this is, which is you roll a dice and you move a piece. And if I was to say that to you, what do you think would be the most obvious example coming into your mind? Monopoly. You said it. I know you did. And that's the thing. So the first and most obvious one is a roll and move mechanic. Now, this mechanic is kind of fallen out of love with a lot of people for specific reasons, except in the race genre, which is very much as simple as it's a race game. Wouldn't you say, Ralph? I mean, that's pretty much what you're going to do. It's roll and move.
You've got your Italians, your Asians, you got...
Oh, no. No. Oh, no. He went
that
there.
wasn't racist. I'm actually acknowledging races, guys.
Yeah, no, I know, but I wasn't expecting him to go there, but he did. But that's exactly right. So in
You're
games,
playing the race game. What can I say?
No. Oh, anyway, but the race game, so there are a couple of examples of race games that we can talk about, which are, for example, there are the first one we talked about is called Formula D, and that uses different sorts of dice depending on what gear you're in, which we both own, Ralph.
Yeah, I love it when you give people the 30-sided dice. So this dice has numbers, I think, 20 to 30 on it, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's great. And they're like, oh, you can go 30 spaces. Yeah, but if you crash into that thing, you'll die because you need to make a break. So that's really cool. So look, that's the very first two ones that we thought you'd understand very easily. Roll and move is the first one, and racing games is very simple. It's get from point A to point B the fastest, and whoever wins is the win. But what we're going to start with is we're going to go into a couple now, and Ralph, I think you can introduce the first one of these are some of the more what we would call mainstream board game mechanics, and we will try and give you a bit of a definition.
That sounds great. So the first one is a game that I really like. It's called worker placement. So what is worker placement? That's when you have a worker, typically a meeple, which is just a nice little figurine that kind of represents a miniature person. And you put it on a space and then you get something. You get a reward. So you get that dopamine hit straight away in a board game. It's so small, but it means a lot. And there's some great games that do this extremely well. One of the most famous ones is Lords of Waterdeep, which is a kind of like a fantasy skin game or themed game. Another one would be like Architects of the West Kingdom, which is very popular among gamers as well.
One that I just sold, I sold Viticulture. And Viticulture is a worker placement game. And the thing about worker placement is it's not just about putting a meeple on a space, which is that generally spaces are limited. And the best spaces, there's generally only one of them. And so turn order is a very big compartment to worker placement games because you're not only just going, I want to go there, you are going to places where I want to go there, so Ralph doesn't get to go there.
Yeah, so it does create a bit of tension on the table, even though you're not directly like attacking each other or anything like that. It's just like, I wanted to do that, now I can't.
Yeah, worker placement games are very highly interactive because it is very dependent on where your opponent goes and things like that. So it's really good. Yeah. So worker placement, placing workers on a board, getting effects is pretty simple to understand.
And I might tag to you for the next one.
Yes, great. I'll go with it. So the next one, we're going to come back to the cards. So we're going to move away from the board, but we're going to come back to the cards for a second, and we're going to introduce the mechanic which is called card drafting. Now, card drafting is not unique to board games. It actually gets used in quite a lot of other things. But the idea of a card draft is that everyone will be given the same amount of cards in a hand. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pick one of those cards from the hand and you're going to put it face down in front of you. And then you're going to take the remaining cards and you're going to pass it to the person either on your left or your right, and everyone else will do the exact same thing. And so what will happen is then you'll receive a new hand, but now it'll only have four cards. And you pick a card and rinse and repeat until you now have a hand of 5 cards which you personally selected. And then from there you can play the game with these things. So card drafting is used in the kind of made popular in the board game scene in the game called Seven Wonders, which you're building an empire. However, a much simpler version and one of my favorite card drafting games is the game of Sushi Go. Sushi Go is, I see Ralph raising his hands over there, so I've obviously picked a good one there. But Sushi Go is literally a game, Ralph, where it's all it is card drafting, except you're just at a sushi train.
Yeah, that's what I love about it is I can teach that game to players and they kind of get take one, pass it on sort of thing. But then during the game, they'll realize, hang on, this is like a sushi train.
Yeah, it is exactly.
So that's a game that uses the mechanic perfectly.
Yeah, so it's like you're getting things like tempura and maki rolls and wasabi and all this other fun, and it makes it really fun, really cut, really light. I mean, but it also goes as far into the hard games as something like Terraforming Mars, for example, which is a really heavy, big game, and it uses card drafting as one of its primary mechanics because you're trying to make a corporation that's terraforming Mars, and you're taking cards specifically so your brothers and your friends can't drop a asteroid on Mars because that would be really bad and they get more points,
What's really interesting about Terraforming Mars, and it's definitely a bigger game, not a gateway game at all. However, I've played it and it says play the first couple of games without doing card drafting, which we did. And then we added the card drafting a bit later, and that's what made the game from good to great. Just that simple mechanic, and it really changed it up.
Yeah, and you never go back with that. So card drafting is a really simple mechanic. It's used across a lot of different card games and things. And so card drafting is a very simple mechanic there. Now, speaking of card games, I'm going to pass back to Ralph because he's going to take us through the next one.
Yeah, sure. So this next theme or sorry, what are we calling these things? They're
genres,
kind of genres of games.
Genres and mechanics, yeah.
They're mechanics of games. So this one is deck building. Now, what deck building is, there's a game called Plank that uses this quite well, where every player starts with the exact same sort of hands of cards or deck of cards. And then during the game, you will add more cards to your deck. Typically, these are better cards. And then they allow you to do more things. And then slowly during the game, you notice what I can do with my cards is different from what other players can do. So you get that really cool thing where it's like, oh, Ralph just did that. That was awesome. And then he's like got some other thing going. And I realize, oh, that he did that really good. That's really cool. So there's lots of really cool examples of this. One of the most famous ones is Dominion, which you're basically adding better and better cards and identifying combos of cards that work really well together to help you get to that final score.
Yeah, Dominion is obviously the biggest example, and the biggest thing for me about deck building is that generally your deck comes with money cards that you can use to buy new cards, as you said, Ralph, but it also involves your point cards, and points are cards. And so generally, if you want points, you have to add them to your deck, which is great because you now have points. But it's also bad because you've now increased the probability of your good cards not coming out and you just getting a card that's worthless for the moment when I'm trying to get my combos going. So it really has this option of deck building really is, do I go for points now or do I actually try to keep building my combo set and go from there? Speaking of combo set, I think we will transfer to this one, which I think, if you don't mind me going to, which is that this kind of the combos that we talk to in board gaming is kind of what we call the mechanic of what you'll hear us refer to as engine building, or I'm building my engine. And engine builders are basically games in which you start with nothing, and by the end of the game, you are comboing like nobody's business. If I roll a 6, I get a gold, and because I got a gold, I now get a point, and because I got a point, I now get to draw an extra card. That's an engine, something that continually spits out something at you when you do something. When I put my foot on the gas, my car goes forward. When I draw 3 cards, I get four gold. That's the engine that you're building. A great example. Now, engine building games tend to be more complex, Ralph, but they are very satisfying.
And a lot of these mechanics overlap. So a lot of the games we're mentioning, they can fit into a lot of these categories, but they're actually mechanics are just kind of one system in a board game. And there's some board games, there's a lot of board games that have multiple of these themes and mechanics to it. My favorite engine builder is Scythe. That sits behind me. But so you kind of start the game very slowly. However, towards the ends of the game, you can start, doing crazy combos and scoring a lot of points very quickly, and any player can do that. It's sort of everyone, it's kind of like a symphony, an engine builder where it starts out with just one instrument, but then slowly every player gets stronger and stronger, and it crescendos beautifully. That's the sign of a great engine builder for me.
Yeah, and it's also a sign of that you built this. You're the one who chose what went into it. You're the one who picked the combos. So when at the other end, depending on if it's good or bad, you only have yourself to blame.
And there's typically a lot of avenues you can go in a good engine builder. There's a lot of places you can explore, but you won't get to explore all of them.
Exactly right. And so you got to pick your strategy. And generally, a specialist will win. Jack of all trades tend to not. So you got to pick B right there. So
that's it.
So that's our engine builders.
Perfect. I might take the next one out.
Yeah, please go for it.
So the next one's one of my favorites. Madonna did say, "Let's get physical." This is a dexterity is the mechanic or the theme. I wouldn't say dexterity is not really a mechanic in a way, but you got to get your body moving. So one of the most famous dexterity games that most people know and don't, I guess a way to explain it would be like air hockey. Kind of at what you see at the local arcade, where you have a disc in the middle of a table and you're kind of hitting it across to each other, trying to get a point. That's an example of a dexterity game. Games like Jenga is another family favorite.
Jenga would probably be the most. Anything that involves you physically having to do something to affect the game, that is kind of a dexterity game. So
that's right. We've got throw burrito, and that always involves people jumping under tables and hitting your head on things you're not supposed to hit with your head.
yeah. There's so many games out there. I mean, you've crokinole, or as you've written it in our document, corn canole.
I was in a panic. But I don't know how to spell crokinole.
Generally, dexterity games actually would be games that you could say require a physical skill or a dexterous skill, something where you as a player can affect the game not by bad luck, but you could practice it and get better at it just by physically doing it and repeated motion.
It's kind of like pool, like snooker.
Yeah,
the more you practice, the better at it you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly right. And so that's what dexterity games are. They're I like Clask, for example. That's kind of like the tabletop air hockey equivalent. So that'd be something there. So speaking of, we'll go from dexterity and we're going to go to another sort of fun one, but this one you can't get better at. You just have to see whether or not you can, quell your lust for more. And we're going to go to the mechanic or genre called Push Your Luck. And this is very simple. It's very much the gambling mechanic, which is that generally in games, Push Your Luck games require you to make a choice of when you can stop and you can bust out of the game. Or an example of this would be, for example, Quacks of Quedlinburg, as we talked, which is that if you keep pulling chips, eventually you're going to blow up. Or, for example, one of the new, obviously, one of the games that Blake discovered, which is Can't Stop, which is it's only Push Your Luck. There is a game literally called Greed, which my sister-in-law Hannah really loves. So she really loves that. And obviously, Ralph, the one that you just talked about, Wonderland's War.
Yeah, I am terrible at push your luck games. I know when to stop, but I have the worst luck in the world when it comes to that. No, but I love that banter. Actually, we played a game of Quacks the other day, and I just love pushing and encouraging people to push their luck. I suffer no consequences for it, but I love that little meta smack talking.
You won't do it. You won't do it. You're
I
scared.
won't do
There's no
it.
way. Oh, yeah, like
If you're
you
if
just
you're a better man, you would do it.
exactly right. I really like push your luck games. They obviously go into that gambler spirit in the middle of like you know what, because it's the high of like when you do, you're like, yeah, that dopamine hit of, yeah, I got it, but then it's obviously that
Mm.
low of like, ah, I really should have stopped. Well, why didn't I stop? I'm an idiot. I let Ralph talk me into pulling another chit. What am I doing?
Yeah,
But yes,
you don't want to be near me at a casino. I don't typically gamble, but I will make sure you do.
yeah. Well, speaking of you do, you can go to the next one and we can get off this topic.
Fair enough, fair enough. I guess the next one will be co-op games. So co-op games is pretty much in the name. It's when you are a team. Um, you're all working towards a common goal, which is to win the game. Typically, there's not really smack talking. We're just encouraging each other and boosting our own egos, which is always fun. A lot of like famous ones are like The Crew, which is a team card game, much like Hearts. Another one
Hmm.
would be Pandemic, where the world has a disease and you're all trying to find the cure for it. That sounds a bit